Calabash, I just bought a new Minelab X-TERRA Elite, and it's got all these settings on it. What do I do? What do I do? Well, if you've clicked on this video, I'm here to help you guys today to ease the learning curve of your new Minelab Elite, and to also give you confidence when you're out in the field. You know, sometimes we get those seeds of doubt when we're not finding nothing, or we get a new detector. Do I have it set up right? You know, have I got it all messed up and it's not detecting correctly, etc., etc. Well, by the end of this video, I hope that you will walk away with the knowledge of how to set your detector up in a simplistic, easy way, and learn your detector in the most comprehensive, less time wasting way too. So I'm going to show you the Elite in real life time out in the test garden with the settings that we talk about in the video. And we're going to show you guys how to utilize your time when going through what I call the agony of learning a new metal detector. So we're going to make that as simple and as easy as possible. This is what I have gathered over my years of testing and learning new metal detectors and using these new multi-frequency line of metal detectors that are on the market today. But let's talk about the Elite. It has simultaneous multi-frequency, which is a new industry standard, and we see it going across brands. And what is that? Well, very simplistic. It's a machine that is able to transmit 2 frequencies at a time. So we're going to start out with, let me get the board right, guys. We're going to start out with talking about frequency first, because this is one of those things that you need a basic understanding of. You can make it as complicated as you want or as simple as you want, and we're going to make it very simple. Here we go. A high frequency is hotter on gold. A low frequency is hotter on silver. But let me get this point across. A low frequency will hit gold ring, and a high frequency will hit a silver coin. And in mild to moderate soil, the depth on coin-sized silver objects from high frequency on these machines to low frequency is very minimal. But where you see the big drastic change with frequency is in iron unmasking. So we'll call iron nails ferrous, good target silver, gold, non-ferrous. So the higher frequency has the ability to unmask better. And I'm going to live demo this for you guys very shortly. So get your popcorn and your drink, because this video is going to take a minute, but I guarantee you there's going to be some valuable information in learning this metal detector. So when we're looking at the Elite, one of the major things is we have to determine what are we hunting or what are we looking for, and that we'll get to all of that later on in the video with programs. But frequency is very simple, simply this: higher frequency, gold; lower frequency, silver. And these machines are able to run, or this machine is able to run multiple frequencies, a lower and a higher at the same time, but it's also able to choose which frequency you want it weighted towards, the higher or the lower. And we're going to get into that again in just a few minutes. Iron, we got frequency, we've got, let's see here, iron bias. What is iron bias? Iron bias is a setting that Minelab has put on their machines to help with big iron falsing and also to help with unmasking. So what does that mean? The higher you raise the iron bias, less iron will false, but you will lose some of the unmasking capabilities. The lower, you will gain unmasking capabilities. And on these Elite, for this video, it's the simplicity of learning. Run your iron at 0 or 1, your iron bias. In the eastern United States, we have found that on Minelab products, a 0 or 1 handles our iron-loaded colonial sights and Civil War sights very well, with minimal iron falsing and great unmasking capabilities. So for this video, to learn your Elite, I say start at 1 or 0, and that complicated iron bias setting has just got solved right there. It's just that simple, 0 or 1 for your iron-loaded sights. Now, one of the things that will have a drastic effect on the performance of the Minelab Elite is the recovery speed. What is recovery speed? It's reaction speed. It's reset speed. So as the Elite sees a target, it processes it and it has to reset itself to when it comes over the next target. The higher recovery speed will make that process faster, but there's some downsides to that. The lower recovery speed will slow that process down, and there's some downsides to that too, but there's some pros and cons to both. Lower recovery speed has greater depth. Higher recovery speed has better separation amongst trash. So, where do we set it? Do we go low or do we go high? Well, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes too. But recovery speed is a very performance-driven setting. You can change the performance of the detector in a drastic way by raising and lowering the recovery speed. So, what do we do? Well, we're going to go outside. We're going to go to the test garden. I'm going to demo the frequency and the recovery speed, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about these settings right here in the 8-ball triangle and how to utilize those settings to make the learning curve easier on the machine. So here we go. Let's go to the test garden. Recovery speed of 1. We got the targets laid out, 3 nickels and a nail. Listen guys, this machine is a fast machine even in 1. But listen to it count off the targets maxed out. All right, guys, we're going to check the recovery speed on depth too. Let's look at 2 while we're here. All right, guys, that is the recovery speed test. Man, that's pretty doggone fast, right? Stay tuned. All right, guys, we got it set up in part 1. We're going to look at an unmasking test. Hit, miss, hit, miss. We're going to look at part 2. And that's why I like part 2. It's got a better unmasking capability than part 1, just like we were talking about inside. Let's go around and look at a depth test. All right, guys, so we're going to look at frequency on this deep silver, 12-inch silver $half I have here. We're going to run it in part 1, which runs a lower weighted frequency, versus part 2. We're going to compare these signals, but this also brings us to a very interesting point that I'm going to talk about, and that is sensitivity. And sometimes more is less. And let me show you this. So you see how erratic the machine is here? We want to back the sensitivity down and get the machine somewhat stable. But settings identical. Sensitivity 20 in part 1, same recovery speed, same everything. We see that it hits the silver $half just fine. Let's look at part 2, same settings behind the scene, but we see that it is a higher frequency and a little bit of EMI change. And we could back the sensitivity down just a little bit. Let's noise cancel the unit while we're here, because this is part of learning the unit too, of how to get this thing stable with EMI. It's pretty good. So in a high EMI area, we're matching pretty much head to head, and this one's 2 points lower on the sensitivity. So we'll talk about that too, but let's look at the recovery speed setting, and we'll just use part 2 as the example. Let's lower it all the way down. Listen. Let's raise it all the way up to see the depth loss. So on the Minelab X-TERRA Elite, the Calibrag Digger Pro tip of the day, 2. It's going to give you good recovery speed. It's going to give you great depth in mild to moderate soil. So there it is, folks. All right, guys. We see what the recovery speed does on depth. We see what the recovery speed did on the recovery speed test. And we also seen what the frequency did on the unmasking. So for me, the Minelab Elite, I would always run part 2 or field 2 when I am chasing artifacts or coins. And why is that? Well, we see that both hit the deep silver in the test garden. So like I said, the higher frequency weighted programs and the lower frequency weighted programs are very close in mild soil. So when we look at the Elite, Park 1 is a lower weighted frequency. Part 2 is a higher weighted frequency. Field 1, lower weighted frequency. Field 2, higher weighted frequency. Higher weighted frequency means that the detector is more sensitive to the smaller objects and it has better unmasking capabilities in Field 2 and Part 2 over Part 1 and Field 1. So, my suggestion is either in Part 2 or Field 2, start out learning your detector. We see that the recovery speed of 2 will give us great unmasking and great depth in mild to moderate soil. We see that we have the iron bias set at 0 to 1 on the machine starting out, and we've chosen our frequency. So we're going to run the higher weighted frequencies on the smell detector. I looked in the Minelab book and it suggested that people start in Part 1, and I'm like, yeah, that's engineers that come up with that, because here's the problem. Switching these programs can change the detector's behavior, and why not go ahead and start out learning the detector in the most efficient program? So we know that Part 2 and Field 2 are the most efficient in unmasking. We see that the depths are very comparable on the silver coins, and we know that that is the most sensitive to tiny objects. So if you're chasing artifacts, small silver hammered coins, why not just start out in Part 2 and Field 2? And that is my suggestion. Ignore the manual. Part 2, Field 2, start out. Now, this is one thing that you should get out of this video. Tones. Let's talk about that for a moment. I cannot help you with this selection. Tones are a personal preference, but I can tell you that when you start out learning these detectors, or this detector in particular, I want you to choose a set of tones and stick with it. Now, if you pick a set of tones and 30 minutes into it or hour into it, you're like, I don't like these tones, and you switch and you change, that's not what I'm talking about. But once you determine, do you want 5 tones, DT audio, or all tones, I want you to stick with those tones for 50 hours. And I want you to set up whether you're using Part 1, Part 2, Field 1, Field 2, Beach 1, Beach 2, I want you to use that same set of tone parameters in every one of those programs. Why? Well, when you change the Elite, let's say from all tones to 2 tones, it turns the Elite into a totally different metal detector. So if you're learning it, and let's say you go out and you hunt for 3 hours, you just got your Elite, you hunt for 3 hours in 2 tones, then you switch over to all tones, you've basically just interrupted your learning process and you've confused your brain, because you basically have another detector in your hand. So, moral of this story, if you are learning the Elite, no matter which program you choose to use, make sure that you have the same tone parameters set up in each one of those programs. Spend at least 50 hours with those tones until you get a handle. Now, for me as a relic hunter, I use the pitch. I call it pitch, but it's DT audio on the Elite. And it's an alertive audio. It's a non-ferrous, ferrous audio. Okay, if it's a ferrous, it has a buzz. If it's non-ferrous, it screams. And that works very, very well for relics and beach hunting. Works very well. But if I was primarily coin hunting, for me, it would be all tones. Now, that can be a little overwhelming for the new user, but once you get a handle on all tones, there's a lot of information in the Minelab all tones. And it works on a sliding conductive scale, and you can read more about that, but it's very information-loaded audio. But some people prefer 5 tones, 4 tones, 2 tones, etc., more simpler audios. But you're going to have to make that determination. But long story short, I don't mean to harp on about the tones, but that is the most, if not, that is the most important thing here in learning this metal detector. You've got to keep the same tone profile and not be jumping back and forth. Now, sensitivity is another factor with these machines. The Minelab machines are very powerful. From the Equinox, in the Manicore, they're all in the Elite, they're all very powerful. Do not run your sensitivity too high. More is less sometimes. And what will happen is you'll make the machine run very erratic, and you will miss the deep stuff. Calm the machine down, lower the sensitivity down, and get it running stable. And you see the depth that I've obtained out there with an 18 sensitivity on that silver coin. Now, programs we've done talked about, but we'll go over real quickly again. Part 1, lower weighted frequency. What did I tell you? Lower weighted frequency would be silver. The part 2 is more what? Higher weighted frequency, and that will do what? It will unmask better and still have great depth on silver coins. We've seen that. So my suggestion is either if you're in field 1, field 2, use the 2. The 2. The 2 is the magic on this machine. It's also the magic on the Equinox series too, because of the way that Minelab has those programs engineered and weighted. Okay, let's look right here. We've got ground balance and noise cancel. And my suggestion is this, to make it very simple. If your ground is mild to moderate, more than likely you will not have to ground balance your machine. On these multi-frequency units, they have them optimized for many soil conditions, and if the machine is running stable, don't worry about the ground balance. It's not like the detectors of old where they had to be ground balanced, not these multi-frequency detectors. So, we get out to the site, we want to do what? We want to noise cancel our machine. What does that do? It helps you deal with EMI. The detector automatically picks a channel that the detector, scans and analyzes to see which is the most efficient channel to run in that environment. Now, that is not a one-time thing. You may be on a site and you may do this 4 or 5 times in a day because EMI changes, and sometimes you just, might want to check it, hit it, especially when you're around cell phones, at the beach, around houses, metal detecting, air conditions. Hit the noise cancel button every now and then. Let the detector choose which channel that it should be running on, because EMI can be silent too behind the scenes. So it's not a one-time deal. Forget it sometimes. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you're not around it. But if you're around a house in a detecting session, you may want to noise cancel 2 or 3 times in that detecting session, especially if you get some EMI erratic behavior out of the metal detector. But let's recap here. The Minelab Elite, high performance unit, a very simple unit to run once you have a basic understanding of frequency, which we've went over in this video. We've seen what the recovery speed does. We know where we want the frequency set. We know what program we want. We know where we want the iron bias set. And this setting can be utilized for different things. And there'll be a video later on with the Elite, and we'll go into that in a little more detail about this iron bias setting and lowering it down, because there's also a negative setting. But for learning purposes, probably 1. If you're get a little more advanced with it, a 0. But we see recovery 2, iron bias 1, 0. We see that we're going to go with the frequency up in the programs. We're going to start off in the 2s, and we're going to set the sensitivity where. We're going to set it where the machine is stable when we get there. We're going to pick our set of tones, and we're going to do what with those tones? We're going to stick with those tones. Why? Because we want our brain and our ears to work together to analyze those tones. And every time we change it, it does what to the Elite? It turns it into another machine. We're going to know it. We're going to ground balance if necessary, but mild to moderate soil, most places not necessary. We're going to noise cancel our machine, and we're going to go detecting. So, I hope this video helps. I hope it gives you a good starting point, and I hope that this video will give you confidence in the Minelab Elite, because I know that when you come from different brands or different detectors, or you're starting out detecting, the seed of doubt can creep in. But if you follow what's been said in this video and you set your detector up like this, this is a very good starting point. And this basically is how we hunt the Minelab detectors in my neck of the woods here in the southeastern United States in mild to moderate soil. So, you guys have a great day. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I appreciate you guys watching.